Spoilers ahead for Hitchcock Psycho. Hey everybody, welcome again to another episode of Screenwriters Rewatch, a series where we venture into IMDb's top 250 film list, pull out some classics, and have a look at them, see if they deserve their place in the annals of film history and in the car-riddled, muddy swamp that we call the script department vaults. But before we get going, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do all of those bits. It's really very, very helpful to us. And go and check out our previous episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get all of those wonderful things. And don't forget to pop over to the Script Department website, where you can see what our global network of screenwriters are up to. They're very interesting. They're very interesting people. You should go check them out. And also keep your ears open for the end. We'll be letting you know what we're going to rewatch next week. So, today I'm joined by Fiona once more as we settle down in a pantry full of stuffed birds with some sandwiches and an ominous tone as screenwriters rewatch Hitchcock's classic horror Psycho, written by Joseph Stefano, and actually number 32 on the IMDb list at the time of recording. So there we go. That's interesting. Welcome once again, Fiona, to Screenwriters Rewatch.
Hello. I'm very excited to talk about Psycho. What a film. What a
film.
History. What an iconic thing. Let's get into it.
It is, isn't it? It is one of those things. It's an undeniable icon of cinema, this one. What are you bringing to the rewatch this time around? What kind of baggage are you bringing with you?
What baggage? It's really funny, isn't it? We have to talk about baggage. Baggage usually comes from childhood first watch, right? And definitely that's the case with me. So I was like this latchkey kid at school, and I had a friend down the road, and every afternoon we'd go to the video shop when there were video shops, and we would hire a bunch of videos to just scare ourselves to pieces. So we went through a plethora of films like The Exorcist and all of that kind of stuff. And Psycho was one of the ones that we watched. And I remember I was 13, and I rode my bike around to my friend's house that day, and I rode so fast home that day after watching this. It was incredible, and was very scared to get in the shower for a long time after that. So, I think definitely baggage is the key word there. How about you? How did you come to it?
Very Stephen King of you, riding your bike fast as you can. I hadn't seen this film. I watched it probably when I was about 13 as well. Actually, it would have been early teens. I saw this for the first time, and it did very little for me at the time.
Really? Gosh.
Yeah, back in my slightly less. I don't know. It was probably a context thing. I watched it with some friends, and I imagine there was lots of conversation, and I think we were probably trying to laugh at it to stop it being scary. One of those sort of sit down to watch sort of situations. But so I did. It was interesting. I've been meaning to revisit it for years and years and years and years and years, and I absolutely will hold my hands up and say it's kind of the reason why I picked it for this, because I needed an excuse to go back and finally check it out. So I walked into it obviously knowing, albeit remotely and from a very distant past, most of the twists and turns that are taken here. And so I kind of expected to be able to sit back and watch it from quite a detached, quite sort of academic, kind of filmy viewpoint. But that was not the case. And Psycho, Hitchcock reached out through the black and white TV screen, grabbed me, and made me very, very interested in what was going on. And I can tell you that 13-year-old me was wrong. It was great.
Well, that's good. Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? I think 13-year-old me was right in that it's still pretty scary, but slightly less scary. And it was really interesting to look at it now as an adult, because it actually was very different for me. I don't know for you if it was the same, but gosh, it was like watching a film in a whole different way, particularly around some of the characters and how I now see some of the characters and some of the actors. So we can chat about that. But it was really interesting, and I absolutely loved it watching it again. And I loved for a whole lot of different reasons. So anyway, we will unpack all of that.
Absolutely. I think for me, what I found watching this time around is in fact that it wasn't it wasn't as scary as I expected it to be. You know, this is considered a landmark horror. And
Mm,
it didn't frighten me at all, but that's,
no.
that's shifting through the years and things like that. And I think there's a caveat on anything, any discussion on this film, is that, it's made in 1960, so we are
Mm,
a lot of years later now,
mm,
than when that was made. So I think, and that's an
definitely.
important caveat to be stated up front there, that
Mm,
to look at this as a film of its time. And I don't think you can do anything else
mm,
really with that one. But
no.
that did jump out at me, that in fact it didn't frighten me as much as it intrigued me. The film itself it wasn't frightening, but the character of Norman Bates um, is quite unnerving. But you know what? The thing I found most frightening about it was actually that bloody police officer
The
with his
policeman, I
sunglasses.
know, it was exactly
Yeah,
the same. That was
terrifying.
really terrifying, wasn't it? And I agree with you. This time round, I was like, my God, that guy is so sinister.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether I thought, did I miss something from the first watch through? Like, or when I'd watched, because I'd watched it a few times over the years, but had I missed something? Because he was really much more sort of ogreish and frightening. Just
Mm.
frightening, I think, is the thing. Yeah.
There's that big shot of him looming into the car, and there's
Yeah,
the
this
big
bit with
sunglasses.
the glasses
Yeah,
and the nose. Yeah.
yeah. It's almost
Yeah.
inhuman, isn't it? The way
Yeah,
he's shot, the way
definitely.
Hitchcock kind of represents him. And I did wonder if perhaps you are as well. If I was bringing a little bit of 21st century, kind of 2022, there is a police officer here in America looming over a woman alone in a car who's just woken up, and perhaps there's an element of, perhaps we're bringing an element of that there. I don't know
Mm,
how intentional that may have been at the time, given that the
yeah.
police officer, that whole story, that whole arc, really, of the police officer and the
Mm,
used car salesman and all this, that, and the other, which is all quite insidious and creepy, I think,
mm.
actually turns out to be a whopping great red herring.
Massive red
And
herring.
huge red herring.
And a great one. And I love,
Mm,
and even the way he was across the road when she was in the car yard and he's just there standing
yeah.
staring. And I thought, gosh, it's amazing, isn't it? Because yeah, and maybe you're right. Maybe it is our modern day eyes that look at that and go, wow, that is just so not okay. And then when the policeman came into the car yard and he parks behind her, and it's just, yeah, it's funny you do put that modern day lens on. I think that's a really key point. And yeah, and it's probably more frightening because of that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I absolutely think so. And then, but I think that kind of bleeds through the watch of this. You move from you have she arrives at Bates Hotel, motel, sorry, and it all begins. I want to talk about the structure of this film, because I think that's the thing that really grabs me about this. I don't think I'm overstating it. No, maybe I am overstating it, and I'm certainly not saying anything new. But it's one of the most interesting structural films that's been made, because if somebody, one of my jobs that I do in this world of film is to consult on screenplays, and somebody walked into my office and went, "Here you go. Here's a screenplay where the main protagonist, where we spend half the film building up to and doing all of this. Here is this screenplay where we are going to kill her halfway through, and we are
Mm,
going to switch to a
yeah.
totally different perspective." I'd
Yeah.
say, you what? No, you can't do that. That's
Don't write
ridiculous.
that.
No, yeah, exactly.
No
Stop.
one will buy that.
Exactly. And yet
Yeah,
and yet
totally.
here it
Yeah.
is. And yet here it
Yeah.
is. And there is a bit of a theme running through these conversations that we've had on Screenwriters Rewatch, which is to the message to screenwriters is to get over the rules sometime, and just tell the
Yeah,
story.
for sure.
And this is one of
Mm.
those moments, I think, because I think it's really important to say that it's genius. It's so
Yeah,
genius, and the way the
it is.
filmmaking backs it up is great.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes you think, doesn't it? Because you've got sort of a first third or so where you've got this protagonist and all this backstory. Why give us all this backstory if you're going to kill her off in, a third of the way or halfway through the film? Not even, probably a third, right? Why do that? And so then it makes you think, well, why? Why did we do that? Why did he do it? And then you start to think about, okay, the relationship between the characters, which we'll probably talk about, and how Marion's character blends in, becomes, or the reflection of the Norman Bates character, and that whole that theory about sort of the night and day, and how, you know, you move from day with Marion into night with Norman, and then and the kind of yin and yang, I guess, of the two. And when you start to think of it like that, you think, well, Mike, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's absolutely genius. And I kind of can't think of anything else that sort of is even similar in that space. Not off the
No.
top of my head, anyway.
Neither can I, and I think that's one of the things. It's the thing that makes me feel a bit better about knowing that I would turn that script around and say don't do that, is because I think it takes someone like Hitchcock to make that work.
Yeah, for
I don't think
sure.
that's the kind of thing you can just do, and it does feel as though he's bringing to bear all of his. This is the podcast about screenwriting, but I think it's important to mention the man himself in this sense, because you feel him bringing to bear all of his directing power on this to make it work. And I think as a story, because I think if I remember rightly, I paused it when it happened, and I'm pretty sure it's dead center. I think it's that
Mm. Oh, is
midpoint of the
it?
film where she's
Right,
killed.
right. Is she?
And
Okay, right.
I think anyway, and it struck me
Mm.
as almost as if it were almost as if it were like a television show, like a 2-part TV show. So you
Gotcha.
have this
Yeah.
initial thing, and then you
Mm.
kill her off in the middle, and then you kind of, in
Mm.
terms of structure, you've almost got two back to back 3 acts going on, and you have this
Mm.
sort of very interesting transition from one to the other. And Hitchcock
Yeah.
very brilliantly sets up that transference of perspective in the bird riddled sandwich room, which
Mm.
is a very unnerving sequence. You know, that
It
that
is.
that Norman Bates leaning back in his chair and saying,
Yeah.
"No, a boy's best friend is always his mother,"
Is his
or something
mother.
like
Yeah,
that. It's,
exactly. And there's the
oh,
owl hanging over him,
yeah,
on the wall. Yeah.
very
Yeah, it's
striking.
amazing. And you know what I loved about Norman Bates' character, which I really picked up this time around and not last time I watched it, was that he was such a convincing boy next door character. Like, you know, and as an actor, I think he was so perfectly cast. And I mean, this time round, it was like, gosh, you know, I really believe this guy. And you actually get a really good sense of empathy towards him at the beginning of his story, if you like. And I think that was really magical, because that flicking back and forth, or the progressive flicking back and forth between the Norman, the innocent boy next door, and then this psychopath, was just beautifully done throughout. So I think it was, yeah, it was just really, really striking to me this time about how good he is as an actor, and how great that casting was, and how beautifully that character was portrayed to give us that sense of innocence right at the beginning. It was amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a film of misdirection, and
Mm,
he really encapsulates that misdirection perfectly, because he is that central figure of misdirection. You know, he is at once two things, and there's a lot of conversation again to talk about these characters. They are extremely complex. You know, you have the Marion's character. The first thing we really see her do, or the one of the, well, yeah, literally the first thing we see her doing is having this kind of illicit affair, and you know, and then immediately or very soon afterwards, we see her steal this money and everything. And Hitchcock at all times, and the screenwriter here is at all times um, kind of justifying these actions by saying, "Oh no, it's okay that she stole that money, because that guy whose money it is an idiot, and he's horrible to her, and he
mm,
flirts
mm,
aggressively with her, and you
mm,
know, we as an audience are kind of going, okay, I want to root for her." And it's very
mm,
clever to build that up. And you see
mm,
this moment where you begin to, again, when she gets into the owl room, as I will forever call it, where she you know, the audience begins to sympathize with Norman Bates, and you know, that moment where he walks in and he finds her dead, and that misdirection in the fact that you really believe, I knew it wasn't, but I believed in that moment that this was Norman on his own. He had no knowledge of this, and his mother, this, you know, this lady off somewhere, this elusive mother figure, had done this. And there's no, and it's so great, it's so interesting to see that there's no black and white if you pardon the pun, in these characters. They are, they are very, very much these shades of grey. Nobody is entirely good, and nobody is entirely bad. And
Yeah.
Norman, I think, really, really, really does that. And I think the psychologist or psychiatrist speech at the end is one of the major low points of the film, and it is a lesson.
It definitely is. And
Yeah,
the
it's
other low point, oh, I just have to touch on this
yeah,
quickly
yeah.
because it was the one thing that really bugged me was that little bit where she writes out on a piece of paper. I mean, I know it's essential to the plot, but where she writes out 40,000 minus 700 equals 39,300. I'm like, oh, come on. You don't have to write that out as a subtraction on a piece of
Yeah,
paper. Surely you can work that out,
yeah,
But obviously, picking up the 40,000, the little piece of paper with it was important to moving the plot along, and her sister, getting onto the case of discovering what had happened. But it did make me laugh. It's like just seeing it with a pencil, 40,000 minus 7. Anyway, the days
100%.
before calculators, probably no, it wasn't before calculators, but yeah, it was very
Yeah,
funny.
perhaps before
But
they were
also,
quite so readily available then, but still
perhaps so.
could
And,
have been done in a, because she immediately tears it up as well. She immediately kind of,
she
yes,
does.
thank you. I have worked out this sum now. I shall tear this up and put it somewhere else. Just what
Yeah.
you don't need to tear it up. You could
No.
take it with
And
you
throw
into
it
the
in the
bathroom.
toilet. Yeah, throw
Yeah,
it in the toilet. Like that's obviously another weird thing to do. But so I wondered whether there was a better way to do that piece. And I know he was obviously they were looking for a way to connect it up, which is fine. But I just thought, wow, I think there might have been a better way that could have been done. But that was my only sort of thing where I was like, oh, that was a bit concerning. But I thought what was interesting when we go back to those characters you were talking about and the sort of light and shade, one of the things I picked up this time around, which I hadn't before, was the mirroring, if you like, of the opening sequence where she's in this illicit affair kind of thing and a very contemporary, normal situation, if you like. And she asks for, or she complains about a couple of things. She says, she doesn't eat the sandwich. The sandwich is there on the side table, untouched. And she says, I just want to sit in my house having a proper, meal. She sort of wants this niceness of life. I want you to come to my house with my sister, and we'll cook with my mother, and all
yeah,
those things she asks her boyfriend for. And then you've got this beautiful reflection where she's in the parlor with Norman, eating the sandwiches, having that lovely conversation, and having exactly what she wants. Like she can't,
mm,
like there's that little moment where
yeah.
she gets just what she wants before it turns really terrible. And I thought that was fantastic. It was something I hadn't really noticed previously, but it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. That's so interesting. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
that's so interesting that she does actually, she has that for just a moment. Do you feel as though because I was really interested in kind of Marion as kind of an audience surrogate here, and who's perspectives, because Hitchcock loves his point of view shots and
Mm,
things like that. You kind of you're very much in the character's head a lot of the time.
mm.
And there's a little bit of kind of, there's an element of voyeurism. We enter through the window of the hotel, and we find them
Yeah,
there.
that's right.
And then the
Mm,
moment she's killed, and we then drift out through the window, and we go
mm,
and try and find that new host for the audience, as it were, and we settle on
mm.
Bates. Um,
Yeah.
do you feel as though we as an audience are almost being punished for rooting for her, because we have this
Mm,
thing where you she is she's done something wrong. There is her sin, in quote unquote, there is her sin. She has stolen money. She has done this bad thing. But you want her to be okay, and you want it to all be all right, because you sort of understand why she's done all of those things. And there is something sort of a little twisted in that logic in these characters and the shades of grey that they live in. And we also, we get that justification given to us for Norman's behavior as well. Not an excuse, but certainly a justification. Um, and I wonder if I wonder if what they're trying to do is to reflect real life in such a way that not everything is always good and not everything is always bad, and then flipping it by then punishing us for falling for that, and punishing us for kind of sympathizing with those people who have done bad things. Because we then, at the very end, after the psychologist has given us all of this spiel and we kind of understand, okay, Norman's had a tough time and all this, that, and the other. And then you see him sat there and he looks down the lens, you get that flash of skull going on, almost for me as if to say, he's pretty evil though, isn't he? Like, you've had all of this stuff going on and it's like, yeah, he's a bad guy though. Do you know what I mean?
But you know yeah, I do. But and what's really interesting about that is I guess one of the things that I've been thinking about is that idea about the relationship between the two of them and this kind of light and shade of each other and the yin and yang of each other. Because I don't know if you remembered or if you can think back to that moment where she's driving the car and she's driving away and the light, we go from day to night. So we take, we're going in from good to bad. So, okay, fine. The very first scene, she's wearing an all white outfit. Once she's stolen the money, she's in a black outfit. So there's all these little signs that we kind of going into not a great place. But as she's driving the car, right at the high point of that scene, she looks straight into the camera and does this smirk. And it's the exact same smirk that Norman does right at the end of the film.
Oh,
and so
damn.
again, it just makes me, I was just thinking about this mirroring of, is this about the light and shade of both of them maybe, and maybe there's this linkage between the two of them as characters. I just kind of, and those sorts of things like the sandwiches and the smile and I don't know, but it's a really interesting thing to consider, isn't it?
It is a really interesting thing.
And she gets lost or she gets killed at the hands of Norman. Norman gets killed at the hands of his mother. There's sort of this, I don't know. It may just be me overthinking.
No, I don't think it is. I think that there are certainly mirroring going on there, and I think that's one of the great things about films like that is the kind of the duality of people represented in two different characters. I think a lot of the time you have, it's a Marvel trope, but it's been a trope long before Marvel was on the scene. The idea of, the hero's antagonist is a reflection of themselves in all things. What am I thinking of? So for some reason, this film really reminds me of the Silence of the Lambs and the Hannibal Lecter character with Clarice. And it does very different things, and it's a very, very, very different movie. But there's something in there in those two characters that reminds me of Bates and Marion, and then Hannibal and Clarice. And again, these are two people who have lost their way. These are and it's so great, the symbolism of the Bates Motel literally being off the beaten track as well. She has strayed off the tracks and she has gone somewhere where she shouldn't have gone physically as well as kind of morally. But this idea that they are in a different world, they probably would have been friends. And I think that's such an interesting thing to look at in to your point, to these characters being similar to one another and the mirroring there. I think it's there. I think it's definitely there.
Yeah, and also because the mirror, the actual mirror, there are so many scenes where there are mirrors with the two of them in those scenes, and that how he uses the mirror is sort of I mean, a mirror is such a classic sort of
course,
very overused thing about different sides of yourself and light and shade and all that sort of stuff. So I just kind of thought that maybe there's something in that around those two almost being like an extension of each other or something, or there was just something really interesting about how that, because of the fact, and I think it was the very first point that triggered me to that, which was the fact that we do have all this backstory and all of this build up of this world of somebody that we actually lose as a, gets killed and is out. So why? We've got to have all of that time with her for a reason. More than just she happens to be the first victim, or she happens to be the victim of a crime, don't know, worth considering.
It's very interesting. I want to talk for a minute about the about that shower scene, the stabbing. It's endlessly parodied and is endlessly it's permeated its way into the zeitgeist in extraordinary ways. But my God, is it effective still? And you see very little of anything. I think in today's world, if you were making this, you'd see the woman, the woman probably naked in a far more graphic sense. You'd see the knife going in, you'd see the spurts of blood going
Yes.
everywhere. You double
Yes.
down on those things for the effect. But I think there's a shot where the knife grazes her stomach. It doesn't even go
Yeah.
in. It just
Yeah.
grazes the stomach.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about that, and the way the blood sort of, there's not that much blood. There's not, to
No,
be
there's
honest,
not
there's
much
not
blood.
enough blood
There's
for
definitely not enough blood.
no. But given how stylized it is as a moment anyway, that is such a great, I think it's a great lesson in terms of sometimes less is more, and sometimes
Mm.
actually that coupled with that iconic moment of music,
Mm.
it just works so well, and I was staggered at how well it still works.
Yeah, and I think the music is something that really needs to be acknowledged in the whole piece, because
Mm,
I was thinking about it when I was rewatching it, thinking, imagine what the movie experience, if you turn the sound down. Like,
yeah.
so much of the suspense and the angst is because of the music all the way through the film. It's such a fantastic addition to the film. So yeah, you're right. And I think I read somewhere that shower scene took something like 70, they did like 70 shots and weaved them together, like an extraordinary amount of film to get that scene, and that the knife never entered the body. And I also wonder whether the lack of blood and the lack of gore, I mean, is also about when it was filmed and what was acceptable in film at the time and all of those sorts of things. So probably a light touch was what would have been acceptable, because the whole thing, in terms of seeing the semi-naked woman that she was a couple of times in the film, talking about affairs and the violence, and for its time would have been really shocking. So it contextually you think, okay, that makes sense about the lighter touch, but the ability to retain the effectiveness given that kind of context, and given where we are now, and it's all the gloves are off now for the kind of slasher movies and gore and violence, absolutely. So I think that's a real testament to the film, that it still manages to be so incredibly effective, and even the fact that it is parodied, I think, is a real testament to the strength of it, as a scene.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting thing. A lot of the films that we cover on here are films that have permeated the zeitgeist, and one of them we covered this Shawshank Redemption a while back,
Yeah.
and I find it quite difficult to watch that film now because of the parodying, and specifically the Family Guy
Oh, right.
parodies
Yeah.
of Shawshank and things like that, which are wonderful, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
want them to not be there. But it is interesting, the way that works. Whereas this, I don't know, there's some, it's the effectiveness of this is just not dulled by those
Mm.
parodies, and I think it is,
Yeah.
yeah, as you say, it's impressive. Um,
Mm.
I want to talk about dampness in this film, and
Ooh, okay.
the use of water, because there's an insidious kind of feeling. I mean, overusing that word terribly in this, but insidious, I feel like it feels like the right word for this film. There's a motif that the writers use throughout this, whereby Norman Bates mentions directly that he doesn't like things. I think I actually wrote it down. I hate this. Yeah, I hate the smell of dampness. Creepy smell. I hate the smell of dampness. It's a creepy smell. And yet his mother, his actual mother, is dead in a damp basement. When Marion arrives, it is raining. When she dies, she is under a shower. He hides the bodies in a damp swamp. There is this, and I feel like the dampness and that kind of feeling of illness is just so present throughout this film. And I wondered if it's something you noticed, because it really leapt out at me as this very, very palpable motif, and I thought it was
Yeah.
really,
That's
really
really
effective.
that's really interesting. I hadn't noticed that. The only thing I'd noticed was, again, just in the mirroring of the first half and second half, was the that point where she was driving and
Mm,
the rain was, it became
yeah.
like really heavy rain on a windscreen, and her face was sort of at some points showing that same sort of shock and the rain was sort of pelting in the same way that it was pelting in the shower. And she
Mm,
had that sort of shock face. So again, there was that sort of similar response there. That was the only thing that I particularly noticed about water, but I did remember him saying about how he didn't like the smell of the damp smell. But
Mm.
you're right. Now you've said that. That's a really interesting point that he is actually surrounded by it. Just kind of
Surrounded
funny,
by,
isn't it?
yeah,
By the
but then again,
dampness.
it works so well with the for his character with absorbing the character of the mother, the very mother that he killed. And he absorbs
Yeah.
her to keep her alive. He hates the thing that he loves, and
Yes.
he hates
Yes.
himself for doing it. And that
Yes. Exactly.
though
So
it's a
perhaps it's
very,
a yeah, perhaps it's a like a metaphor for his inner conflict. Maybe I don't know,
yeah,
or something.
I think so. And then hiding his victims and his crimes in the swamp. It's
Swamp.
it's it's a very interesting motif there that I think the writers
Mm,
use, and I think it's really cool. There's so much we could kind of look into here.
mm,
I've got just one note I've made here is just the use of dramatic irony in that second half of the film, when the PI arrives and and they're looking around and everything is just so brilliant. The way it kind of we know
yeah.
what's happened. The audience knows what's
Yeah.
happened because we
Yeah.
were we were basically in her head when it happened,
Yeah.
and then we've
Yeah.
gone and we found this other thing, and we find this unreliable narrator in Norman Bates, and yeah, it's a masterclass in how giving the audience bits of information that the characters don't have, but still not everything, is such a
Yeah.
it's such a great tool to use.
Yeah, definitely. I love the way that the that we shifted. It's sort of slightly off topic, but well, kind of
Yeah,
related. Where she talks, where at the beginning of the film you've got it's just a very ordinary straight scene, played out as you would ordinarily see a conversational scene in the. I'm thinking about in the office when she was before she steals the money, and everything's very straightforward. And then the next thing, you're inside her head. She's driving along. You're hearing her inner thoughts, and then later on, you're hearing towards the end, you hear the mother's inner thoughts. And so that really that idea, the way he kind of toys with you all the way through with this sort of sense of perspective, and giving you little bits of information, but equally sort of shifting out of points of view and perspectives and information, and you're just kind of lulled by it. You just kind of go, oh yeah, there's nothing weird here. Like, of course, I can hear someone's thoughts and then another character's thoughts. It's really beautifully done, and the way he just carries you along without you going, hang on, what's happening here? Where am I? What perspective? What am I? Where should I be looking? So yeah, it's kind of brilliant, really.
it's incredibly impressive, like the
Yeah.
and the way it all works. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things. For me, I'm looking now, kind of at what can you take from this as a new screenwriter, as
Oh
somebody
gosh.
kind of coming into it. I mean, everything is the answer.
Oh,
Everything from this film is what you can take. But for you, what would you say is kind of your number one takeaway from this?
okay.
I'm putting you on the
I
spot. I'm really sorry.
I
That's
know.
really mean.
It's all right. No, I can. I've got lots of thoughts about this still. So yeah, I think for me, the thing that really struck me, because I'm always, I'm all about storytelling. I think
Hmm.
storytelling is so fundamental, and one of my big complaints about modern, as I've probably talked about on here already, one of my big complaints about modern day current films is that so often it's about the spectacle and not the story. And what I loved about this movie was Hitchcock as the supreme director that he is, but he took the story, he actually brought the story to life. It was, I felt that combination of the kind of the script and the director really tightly. I felt that there was this really strong union between the two, and that he was really trying to serve that script and bring out the story, because those characters and the actual story was really strong, and that I loved, and I think I felt that that's something that maybe we don't see enough of these days. Um, so that was the main thing, but then equally, the only other thing that I thought, which I'll just add in, is what we said at the beginning, which is don't be too concerned about the rule book
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
It's yeah, you've got to just tell a good story, right? Whatever, however you need to do that.
Yeah, sometimes that's
Yeah.
what it's all about, and I think it's something we come back to again and again and again on these episodes. Is
Mm,
the rules are important; they're there for a reason, and we can
yeah.
identify them for sure.
Yeah.
But sometimes the rules are, you got to learn the rules to break the rules, and I think that's one of those
Yes,
things
that's
that
true. That's true.
this is a master at work breaking the rules
Yeah.
with such uh, poise and delicacy.
And
It's really
ease.
wonderful. And ease, yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah. And what else did you take away? Anything else that you took away?
For me, it's a couple of phrases really that really jumped out at me, and kind of ideas about how this is written. And one of them is just less is more, and that is, that in that shower sequence, less is more. The immediate aftermath of that, the cleanup, Bates cleaning up, that he doesn't talk, he doesn't say anything, he doesn't just he just cleans it up, but kind of diligently. He's not making rapid facial movements, he's not darting around the room, he's not looking at the paper on the wall and then going back the other way and going, ooh, I nearly missed it. It's very gentle, it's very subtle, there's barely anything going on, and you can read so much more into that than you can anything else. And my number one thing whenever I'm consulting or I'm teaching or whatever it is that sometimes dialogue is your enemy, and you do not need to. You can tell a great story if the story is good enough, you can tell it in silence. And I think this is one of those films where we said it in The Godfather as well. These are screenwriters who are allowing the story to tell itself through movement, through looks, through things like that, in tandem with the great director. And that also spins around to this idea of showing and not telling, the golden rule of screenwriting: show, don't tell, and just trusting your audience to keep up. I think that's what this film does so well, is that you can feel the trust. You can feel that it's kind of going, it's standing there, and it's going, now go on, you're with me, you get this, you can. I'm not going to tell you about this because you're already there, right? And you feel that trust, and you feel brought into a kind of brought very nicely into a world, but then trusted to navigate yourself around. And I think that's what it is for me. And these are always notes that I think are important. And
Definitely.
you know,
And I think
that's yeah.
Hitchcock is a master at that, isn't he? I think he does that in all his films. He really
Mhm.
sort of takes you in and trusts you and lets you just be part of that journey, which I think is wonderful. I think it's something where I was actually talking to some friends the other day about whether Hitchcock is a genre in itself, because you kind of know what you're getting with it, but there's all those wonderful attributes um of how the story unfolds with Hitchcock, which you get to know and because sometimes I don't know about you, but sometimes I go, you know what? I'd just love to watch a Hitchcock. Just just it has that you kind of know what you're going to get from it in a really great way. But a question for you on this then. They say they say that they consider this film to be potentially the pinnacle thriller film of cinema history. So my question for you is, do you agree with that statement? And if you don't agree, would you offer a different thriller film in its place as a sort of pinnacle of thriller, not slasher, but thriller?
Mm. I think I probably would agree. I
Mm.
think I'd need to give it a little more thought to
Mm.
present, certainly to present any kind of alternative, because as I'm flicking through the DVD case in my mind,
Well,
I am
exactly.
I'm struggling
You have to
to.
you have to flick through, right?
Got to flick through. I'm on
There's
the.
nothing right there.
No, there's not. There is.
Yeah,
I think
it
because of the. I mean, yeah. I think I agree. I think that's the answer to it, and I think that because of the innovation, because of the fact that it did so much for the first time, because of its kind of because of its structure defying nature, all of these things, I think it has to be. Um, and it's interesting though to look at it as a genre piece, because it's so often described as a horror. And I'm kind of going along with that and kind of going, oh yeah, okay, well, it's a horror film, I guess, but it doesn't in any way to me feel like a horror film. It definitely feels like a thriller, um, and yet, it is described again and again and again as a um, as a horror. So it's quite interesting to consider. Um, there are certainly films that have greater moments of suspense. I think there are films, well, certainly more personal suspense, I suppose. I look to Schindler's List, and the sequence the sequence of in the basement, between Ralph Fiennes' character and I forget the name. I haven't seen that film for a long time. We'll cover that on here at some point. There's that sequence there, which I think the personal stakes of here is, it's almost like watching a wolf prowl, and you never know when it's going to strike, and you think he's going to strike, and you're sure he's going to strike. And I felt my heart. I can feel my heart speeding up talking about that sequence.
Wow,
because it's
so very powerful.
Very, very powerful sequence, but that with the context and everything else, I think there are more powerful and more suspenseful sequences, but as a film entirely, I think it probably is unmatched. That's a long and very slow answer to your question.
No, it needs to be thought through, doesn't it? Because it's not something that you can just go, oh yeah. But when you think about other films, because I guess kind of covers, it's kind of got a bit of a different genres there, and I can't think of any that I would go, certainly on the more thriller side, that I would say is as effective, and then equally on the kind of slasher side, horror movie, I can't kind of think of anything either. So it's it's one to ponder though, isn't it? Because then I started to think through other movies that I thought were kind of effective and really love in that space. And most of them are ones that are sort of not really even very well known. So they're not particularly iconic in their own right. So it sort of lends itself to maybe this holds its own place, which is probably why it's number 33 on the list of top films.
What an excellent way to loop back round to you're a pro at this. This is wonderful. I know the answer to this, but I have to ask it every single time. Are we putting this in the script department vaults?
Oh, we're certainly putting it in. We're slam dunking it into the vaults. That's what we're doing.
100%.
Don't you agree?
Yes, of course. Every time it can have its own case. It can have its own specially lit case in the vaults.
It needs its own little plinth with a glass kind of case, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. Or unless what we do is we just give Hitchcock a room, and he can sort of have we could have like a hitch corridor, and you walk down it, and you're surrounded by birds like leering down at you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's the challenge. Is there enough body of work that goes into the vault that can justify a Hitchcock hallway or a Hitchcock walk? Yeah,
interesting.
With complete with plinths, with glass jars, like very much specimen-like, very in keeping with Hitchcock.
Sure.
With the little, DVDs or whatever it is. What are we putting in there? Is it a DVD? What the hell is that? It's the cover, the poster, the movie poster, maybe.
Yeah, it's every possible version of it. We've got videotapes, we've got ripped off TV Betamax, we've got
Blu-ray
DVDs, Blu-rays, we've got the link to streaming services. We got it all. We got it all in the script department vaults. It's all there. Fiona, thank you so much for that really, really terrific conversation on Hitchcock Psycho.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. That was fun.
That was a lot of fun. Next time, ladies and gents, we are looking at Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And before anybody yells at me that it's not in IMDb's top 250 list, then I have one thing to say, and that's just basically shut up, because I want to talk about it. And so that's
feedback.
Exactly. Shut up. And thanks. Also, we're beginning to venture down Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. So we are also going to tie in with that. But that's for another day. Fiona, thank you so much for talking about Psycho today.
Pleasure.
Feel free to pop by to the Script Department website for all of the interesting stuff, and go backwards, have a look at our other things as well. They are great. And until next time, folks, see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.